Every day, you essentially pay your dues by doing the harder thing when it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, like strength and conditioning is massive, like loading and repetitions. And I think I had no idea, like I'm still figuring it out now, but like the mental side of the sport is like massive.
Yeah.
And it is to an extent muscle memory, but I think for me getting older, like having cues to my routines, having cues to my skills, like in a sport that is about consistency, like if you don't really know what you're thinking, you don't really know what you're doing, and you're kind of just guessing it, then how you're going to do the same thing every time, and especially in high pressure situations. And again, I've learned a lot through just listening to other gymnasts, listening to different coaches, working with more sports psychs, and also figuring out what works for you. What works for one gymnast doesn't work for every gymnast. And I think in the sport, again, it's so specific, like there needs to be more individualization rather than you're all doing the same thing. And I understand that more when you're younger, kind of getting a general base and a general balance, but then like everybody has different strengths and weaknesses, and it's kind of like being specific to you, what you need to work on. And again, when I hopefully get to coach one day, I think that's something that I think is really important and feel pretty passionately about, is that you're all individuals as much as you then want to come together as a team. Like you are an individual, and it's working on what can be best for that person that can then bring the best aspects to a team. Like every kid is different, and I think just looking at like myself and Ellie's gymnastics careers, like we're sisters, we've grown up in the same household, we do very similar things, but our personalities are so different. And what's something that might affect Ellie I might not even care about, and vice versa. And I think it's, for me, I feel really strongly about like really knowing your athlete. Like if you know what's wrong with them, like you can get them to talk. I think communication is huge, and for so long in my career, I think that was a problem with me, like communicating what I was feeling, to help improve your training rather than being too afraid to talk or unsure what to say or how to communicate it. So you just don't, and you just bottle it all up. I think, knowing your athletes is massive, and communication, like no matter how big or small the problem is, if you can talk about it, then you can normally resolve it. But if you don't let anyone know, then no one can help you.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest thing is as coaches and as people who are definitely trying to take our experiences as athletes and build new environments. It's like building the ability for athletes to feel comfortable speaking up about stuff like early injuries and fear about skills, or, whatever. Like in my world with the team that I coach now, it's like someone just like hated on me on Instagram and it really hurt my feelings. And like, I can't even focus right now. Like being able to talk about that stuff is super important, because once you dive into the, it's like pulling a yarn on your shirt. As soon as you pull one thing, like it all comes washing out. But that's way more important than gymnastics some days.
Yeah, it is. And I think if you take those problems into the gym as well, it's not just a sport now where it's doing the odd flip or somersault. Like if your head's not in it, like I think for me, especially as I've got older, I've learned that like it makes it so much harder to train and do what you want to do. And it can be something that is just so small and to someone might seem quite insignificant, but if you can just get it off your chest, then it just makes life so much easier.
Same thing. There's this eerie calm that you can have in your mind when you train, when you know that like you're not doing it for anybody else. You're honestly just doing whatever you possibly can to do the best version that you can for yourself. There's like, it's weird because like you said, you almost pull out the brakes and you have no fail safe anymore. You're like, all right, like I really don't care what anybody says. I'm just trying to ride this out for myself. And that's something that's so hard to teach unless you've gone through a lot of adversity. It's impossible, right? If you've had a nice little smooth ride and had no bumps along the road, you don't really have anything to set on for your brakes,
Yeah, and I think it's so easy for people to look in from the outside and see that one routine or a couple of championships where you haven't necessarily performed at your best, but they have no idea like what happens in like our training camps and the build up, what's happened to you like 2-3 months before. You might have rolled your ankle and you've been managing an ankle injury for all that time, and like it's all those little things. And as you say, as you get older, you realize like it's not important to anyone else. Like as long as you know what you're doing, you know the reasons, you can kind of rectify them and just keep striving forwards.
Yeah, it's Tim Gabbett was one of the researchers I had on, and he had a really interesting quote. He said, my dad used to always tell me when I was working really hard that nobody can win goals from the sidelines. He's like, it's so easy for people sitting in the stands to critique you and say this and say that. Like, as a fan of the sport, like, I understand that's part of the game. That's kind of like being a fan, right? But it's really easy to be sitting there and critiquing someone when, like, you're not actively in the battlegrounds. You know, it's like completely different and stuff like that. But I think the lessons that come out of it is like learning how to only depend on yourself and pick yourself back up, right? Like train again and like keep moving forward. Like, that's probably where you get more of the, you know, the learning comes from the ability to, like, okay, if I do have something that happens and it doesn't go my way, like, what do I do the next week? You know, do I let it just bury me and crumble it? Or is it like, all right, take a day to myself and then, you know, find it?
Yeah, like, I've definitely learned so much more. I mean, as I said, it's not been easy, but it's great to have the success and win the medals. But then I've learned so much more from the harder times than I have from when it's just gone right. And it's made me, I understand the sport so much more. I understand myself so much more. And I think just like character building and knowing how to pick yourself back up and kind of get through that, it makes you a stronger person. I'd say my first major injury was my Achilles rupture in 2011. And honestly, like, it was a horrible thing to go through, but I kind of remember thinking at the time, like, I get a break. Because I'd never not stopped competing since I was small until that point. And it was like not a nice thing to go through, but it was really nice to think I haven't got to compete and try and win right now. Like, all I've got to focus on is just getting better. And it kind of opened up a new side of strength and conditioning for me because I'd done that gymnastics conditioning for so long. I'd never really done cardio training or other than like your stamina sets in the gym. But I had to learn to keep fit in a different way because I could then all of a sudden couldn't do the gym. So I think that was a massive eye-opener, as well as having the big injury. Like, it taught me a lot about training in a different way. And I think then I incorporated that more into my training as I recovered and got back into a full gymnastics program. And yeah, I think it's surrounding yourself with people that just care about you will always help you. I've always had the most supportive family, and even from when I was small, it was never, you have to go to gym. It was like, if you want to quit tomorrow, it's your decision kind of thing. And I think, again, that's helped me stay in it so long, because it's not been, you have to do it, you have to go. And if there's a day or even a week and I'm like, I ain't going, then my mum's like, that side of it's evolved so much since I first started. My very first surgery was like, it wasn't a major one, but I had some bone spurs removed off both ankles at the same time. And it was a year before Beijing. And as I said, it wasn't a major procedure, but my ankles had been blocked into this range for so long. And since I had these bones removed, it was like not a long healing time, but my feet could just have all this new range. And then I started getting pain in different areas because my feet were better, but they needed to be conditioned in that way, which I know now. But rehab and, again, the S&C thing wasn't a major thing. And the next year was Beijing. So it was kind of tough, take your feet and get through. And I did, and it was great. I made an Olympic team, but then the amount of ankle problems I had since, like 2009, 10, 11, and again, like, unless you go through that and learn that, you don't know. And I think as much as it can be frustrating for the athlete and for the coach, like, to admit that something's painful or that you need to stopping for a day, a week, or even a month is nothing in the grand scheme of a year, which it will turn out to be if you don't take that time. And again, I've learned the hard way through many different injuries, and it's just not worth it. Like, for 2 days, replace it with something else. And normally when you're on the edge of being pretty sore, you can give it a few days and it'll be quite calm, and you can just then manage that load again. But not communicating that, it's like you can take those 2 days, or that extra day you push, you could just break something. Or that's when it goes, and then you look back and think, oh, what did we do wrong? Well, yeah, that's what you did wrong. You just needed a bit of a time out. Just because you've got maybe that double twist on vault doesn't mean that you have to then compete it on hard surface like 5 times that year. Like, if you wanted to maybe put it out once for a bit of experience, but then keep it on soft, it's kind of like, it's finding that balance. And again, communicating with your athlete, how do they feel? How do they mentally feel about putting it out? And I think a lot of coaches don't realize how scary it is. Like, if you're not 100% confident in something, it is so scary to go out there and like do it every single day. And not just because you're scared of hurting yourself, but also, like, if you are feeling a bit more tired, if you're not 100% mentally there, then you can hurt yourself pretty badly and quite quickly just through not communicating. And I think that's the difference between gymnastics and a lot of other sports is, as you said, if you get sore legs, you can still run. But if you have sore legs and you actually can't jump as high to get in 2 flips and 2 twists, then you're going to land on your head and you can break a foot on the way down. Like, that's the difference. And I think it's, again, communication and knowing that the sport and the skill level has just upped so much. You've got to be strong enough for it, and you've got to be ready for it.